Hi, and welcome to Mad Poetry, Mental Illness Reimagined. My name is Georgia Vracas. I'm a clinical psychologist, an academic, and a bipolar woman. I also identify as mad. This podcast is a space dedicated to destigmatizing mental illness, putting lived experience at the forefront, and creating mad knowledge through poetry. Today's episode, called The Right to Live with a Mental Illness, focuses on Canada's debate on medical assistance in dying, or MAiD for short, for people whose only condition is a mental illness. It is a very important topic with far-reaching implications. I have been advocating against this expansion of MAiD since 2019. Those who advocate for MAiD for mental illness state that by not offering MAiD for mental illness, we as a society would be discriminating against the mentally ill. However, why are we not fighting just as hard so we are less discriminated while we are still alive, as in access to affordable housing, living wages, employment, etc.? They also argue that mental illness can be irremediable, like cancer, for example, so people with a mental illness should have the same access to MAiD as people with physical illnesses do. However, we have no way of knowing the course of a mental illness. It is not a straightforward thing. Sometimes you move forward, then you move a step back, and then another move forward. So it is unknown based on the research we have now. And we don't know if it is irremediable based on the evidence we have. Those groups also affirm that it is possible for people with mental illness to rationally make such a major end-of-life decision, even though the research shows that mental illness is a risk factor for suicide, and the majority of suicide had a mental illness. So this means that we cannot reliably differentiate a person with mental illness who wants to die by their own hand from the one who wants to die by a doctor's hand. I'm talking about this today because a special parliamentary committee was mandated by the federal government to study whether or not MAiD should be expanded to include mental illness. And they published their report this past June, around the 17th of June, after meeting with several experts in the field. They had one recommendation, which was that the Government of Canada amend the criminal code to indefinitely exclude persons whose sole underlying medical condition is a mental illness from eligibility for medical assistance in dying. So, for me, this is good news. And their conclusion was based on a lack of consensus on the issue and the many, many unanswered questions, including irremediability, suicidality, lack of adequate mental health services, lack of evidence-based data on mental illness, and even lack of agreed-upon definition of what a mental illness is. The committee's recommendation makes a lot of sense if we consider all this. What really gets to me as a bipolar woman who has a psychiatrist, who takes medication, who's also a clinical psychologist, and who is also an academic specializing in mental health, mental illness, and suicide prevention, what gets to me are the psychiatrists who are pushing hard for MAiD still today. If anyone knows the lack of evidence-based psychiatric knowledge and pharmacological treatments, it is them. It's their day-to-day. However, instead of advocating for more research and mental health services, they propose offering patients euthanasia as a solution to reduce their suffering. So I'm not saying that they don't advocate for research and mental health services, but the fact that a profession, doctors, psychiatrists, whose job is to help us recover, are focusing on providing us with euthanasia, that's what gets to me the most, because I don't see those two things as being compatible. So another thing that bothers me, even with this commission, is the hyper-focus on pharmaceutical treatments, as if recovery is only about taking meds and reducing symptoms. The psychosocial aspects of recovery are completely evacuated. No psychologists, no social workers, etc. were met by the committee, and they should have, because these are the mental health professionals who help their patients recover and live better lives. So for me, the psychiatrists who are strong supporters of MAiD for mental illness should be helping us to find hope and ways to alleviate our suffering and live better lives, like the psychologists, like the social workers, and other mental health professionals. So having a mental illness is not a death sentence. It is not. And to make sure that we get better and we recover, it is not only about taking medication, but about creating hope, helping the person in front of us find a sliver of hope through which we can work and care for and support the recovery. So all of which cannot be simply achieved with taking medication. You need a whole bunch of services there, mental health professionals to help you. We also know that social determinants of health have a big impact on mental health and illness, and there's no pill that can reduce social inequalities. So that would involve even more macrosystemic work within our society. So, which is obviously much more complicated than pharmacological treatments. So personally, I'm very relieved by the recommendation of the committee. Now we must wait for the federal government's decision, and I really hope they maintain the exclusion of mental illness for MAiD. I will leave you with my poem entitled "My Knee Was Born Crooked." So, my knee was born crooked, turned inwards as if facing away from the world. The bones cradling it in place are unable to do their job properly. They were also born crooked, facing the other way. They said I will always be broken. Damaged goods. Last week I dreamt that my knee hurt. No wonder. A dozen sharp shards of glass have dug their claws into it. As I watch, each shard falls to the ground, one by one in slow motion. Tiny wounds are left behind, each releasing a trail of blood, like tears. Last night, my knee hurt, waking me up like a sharp knock at my door. My heart beats through the steady rhythm of the pain. Today, my knee hurts. The pain is persistent. My knee feels it as I walk, as I talk, as I drive, as I work, as I get up and down, as I breathe, as I live. Tonight, I dream that the pain in my knee is receding. No more blood. My wounds are healing. I'm still crooked, but it's okay. I'm okay. I open my eyes and I smile. I hurt less than yesterday. So this poem, although it is about physical pain, is a parallel to the psychological pain, psychological distress we have as people with a mental illness. And although we accept that, it's not going to be an easy process getting through all this, but there is hope. Okay, so thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, you can write to me at themadpoetrypodcast@gmail.com. themadpoetrypodcast@gmail.com. Till next time.